day, senior high school students, and welcome to our virtual discussion for the 21st century literature from the Philippines and the world. By the way, I am Sir Alex Garcia, your virtual teacher for this week's lesson. Congratulations on successfully finishing your week 4 lesson for this quarter. Now, you are about to learn the week 5 lesson for this quarter titled Producing a Creative Adaptation from Across National Literature and Cultures. Are you ready? Let's go! But before that, let me ask, what are the daily activities or routines you usually do to keep yourself entertained during this pandemic? Some of you may be doing exercises like cycling, jogging, or working out, while others want to stay indoors to keep themselves safe from the virus. They just actively engage themselves in posting videos on social media like TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram, or they just read some books, or binge watch some series on Netflix. There are many activities and videos to watch on our mobile devices without realizing that this may be literature manifested in various forms. As we approach the 21st century, literature has evolved in different compositions, genres, themes, and representations as it embraces the changes of our culture. Most people nowadays enjoy literature in the form of entertainment such as modern songs, games, dances, animations, vlogs, and even teleserye. They become more engaged to these different representations of literature made accessible by digital devices. Because of modern technologies, we also witness the beauty of the various literary adaptations from across the country. This series we have watched on Netflix, be it anime or K-drama, have the original manifestation of the story. If you are watching a series of anime and the new episode hasn't been released yet, you are going to watch or read the story on manga. In this lesson, we are going to focus on the creative adaptation of a literary work, its types, and literature in other countries. But before that, let us define first the meaning of a literary adaptation. So what is literary adaptation? Literary adaptation is adjusting a literary source, for example, a novel, short story, a poem, to another type or medium, like a film, stage play, or song. Movies or songs were once written literary works as a novel or poetry. That is an example of a literary adaptation. Adaptation should also maintain the newly converted literary piece as interesting and exciting as the original to preserve the essence of the work. According to Watts 2020, there are 4 types of literary adaptations to determine how an adaptation chooses to interpret its source materials. The 4 types of literary adaptations are museum adaptation, artful adaptation, loose adaptation, and transformative adaptation. Let's begin with the museum adaptation. Museum adaptation is concerned with preserving every possible detail of the literary source and how it is transferred to another genre or medium. This adaptation should include the original version or nearly every scene of the book. This is more like a copy-paste of the original as you adjusted the literary work to another genre. If there was ever a perfect example of a museum adaptation, it is the 1995 TV miniseries of Pride and Prejudice, where all the details of the events from the books are almost portrayed in the adaptation. This classic story revolves around frenzied, willful, and opinionated Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. The adaptation of this novel preserves the details of the books to show the audience the culture and practices during this period. We call it museum adaptation because, like a real museum, it displays the real event of the original source. The second type of literary adaptation is the artful adaptation. This artful adaptation is mainly concerned with finding a balance between being true to its source material and creating a film that can stand on its own as a work of art. Rather than preserving every detail like a museum, this focuses on the essential elements of the book and interprets them in ways that are meaningful for the audience. Let us consider this another adaptation of Pride and Prejudice in 2005, written by Deborah Moga based on Jane Austen's novel and directed by Joe Wright. The more artful elements are the modifications of the set and costume design, which are less concerned with historical accuracy than reflecting the characters' personalities and relationships. It also, by necessity, cuts or combines plot points from the novel to fit within its 2-hour runtime compared to the 1995 version, divided by episode to cover every detail of the scene. This is considered an artful adaptation since the essential elements of the book are all present and imbued with meaning for modern audiences. These changes are made to give another perspective and lesson based on the same story portrayed differently. Compared to the museum adaptation that mirrors most details to another genre, artful adaptation shows the literary work balanced from the source to how it will be more meaningful to the audience. Take note, the essential elements of the story are still there, and it is just the minor details of the event that have changed. Another type of literary adaptation is the loose adaptation. Loose adaptation keeps a few elements of some semblance of the premise of the literary source. It changes some scenes to be more interesting and exciting in another medium or genre. Most readers give their critics due to the noticeable difference of the scenes from the book to the film. In this adaptation, the changes are noticeable and far different from the source. They might be a different climax or ending of the story that sometimes gets criticism from the audience. Let us have Twilight as our example to show the loose adaptation. I know that most of you have already heard or watched this movie since we are very fascinated with a vampire love story. Twilight is about Edward, a vampire who fell in love with a human, Bella. A difference in the scene happened when Bella was searching for answers to the vampire legend. She was interested in searching vampires once she suspected what Edward was. In the novel, she Googled and surfed the internet looking for answers, coming up empty-handed. Bella did browse the internet in the movie, but she purchased a book that mentioned the old ones from the book. This change may have caused a movie blooper as she buys the book before Edward rescues her from the aggressive man on the street. Edward and Bella have dinner, spend the evening together, and the book mysteriously disappears, only to reappear when she resumes her research in her room later that night. Bella did not have a bag, so some fans pointed out that it would have made sense for her to be carrying the book around. Bella could have had the book tucked in her jacket, but this is truly a movie blooper if she did not. These are some evidences to show that loose adaptation changes scenes or even the essential element of the story to make the movie more appealing and exciting for the audience. Lastly, we have the transformative adaptation. Transformative adaptation sets its source works in a time period and takes place in a different culture to emphasize the timelessness and universality of the source work's message and theme. An excellent example to show the transformative adaptation is the movie Into the Woods. This is just another classic story of Cinderella told in another concept and setting. Into the Woods is a modern twist on the beloved Brothers Grimm fairy tales in a musical format that follows the classic tales of Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Jack, and the Beanstalk, and Rapunzel all tied together by an original story involving a baker and his wife. Their wish to begin a family and their interaction with the witch who has put a curse on them. As you notice, there are many versions of Cinderella, but the thought of the story as is still portrayed to show the timelessness and universality of the story's message. These are the 4 types of literary adaptation: the museum, artful, loose, and transformative. This time, we will now proceed with the characteristics of literature in different countries. We will consider how literature is defined, or the features of literature in Africa, America, and Australia. African literature focuses mainly on the traditions of South African, Francophones, and Anglophones literature, since French and English languages influence African people. Also, just like American literature in the 18th to 19th centuries, South African literature produces literary works primarily concerned with racial segregations and discrimination because they were subjected to many kinds of prejudice and discrimination because of their race and color. Because of these available literary pieces, we were able to picture the life of Africans and the bias due to their skin color and economic status. For the Francophone tradition, it is chiefly preoccupied with an assertion of the inherent values of a distinctive African identity. This is to give highlight to their own values and characteristics, being distinct from other influences. Lastly, African fiction in English focuses on the tension between traditional and Western modes of living and seeks to place the Africans' struggle against Western dominion and exploitation in the correct perspective. Since African people are highly influenced by the Westerners, many literary pieces show some changes of culture and lifestyle. For the American literature, which is also called Indian or American Indian literature, focused on the traditional oral and written literatures of the indigenous people of the America. These include ancient hieroglyphics and pictographic writings of Middle America, as well as an extensive set of folktales, myths, and oral histories that were transmitted for centuries by storytellers and that live on in the language works of many contemporary American Indian writers. But if you are going to compare their lifestyle and culture to this generation, there is a major leap on how they portray arts in different adaptations. Lastly, we have the Australian literature. This is mostly oral literature such as songs, myths, legends, stories, as part of an oral tradition handed down over centuries. When Australia had become an extension of European civilization, some of the Aboriginal stories are collected and translated. The writings that emerged from these early immigrants and their descendants had 2 main emphases: the distinctive qualities of the land itself and the lives of the former convicts made in their new home. All these kinds of literature highlight the different adaptations of arts depending on the available and relevant resources to create a more significant influence both in arts and in culture building. To sum up our lesson, let us consider this example of story adapted to a poem. This is The Flicker Fade Gone, written by Joe Javier and adapted and interpreted in another version by Alexis Garcia. Let us read first the summary of the story. Flicker Fade Gone by Carl Joe Javier. The story focuses on the boy who becomes addicted to playing games from the arcade. His addiction to these games started when his father brought him to the arcade for the first time. He dreamed of becoming a key master who has unlimited access to all of these games. As he grew up, he goes and stays in the arcade whenever he wanted to escape reality. Not long after, he achieved his dream to be the keymaster. He is already in charge of the whole arcade and makes it his home. In the arcade, he met the girl who makes him fall in love. He got a chance to talk to her when she was involved in a minor fight with her boyfriend as he meddled with them. Week after week, he looks forward to seeing this girl in the arcade, but the girl seemed not to know him and forgot who he is. He felt broken and alone as he realized that no one knew him in the arcade aside from being the keymaster. He abused his body by playing non-stop all through the night just to forget and escape reality. Then morning came, he was nowhere to be found, and no one knew him personally. Surprisingly, he became part of the video game, successfully escaping the reality of life. Now, let us also read its adaptation, written in poem. Flicker, Fade, Gone, and Adaptation by Alexis Garcia. I went silent in a dark room, trying to save a girl just about to bloom. Enemies with their guns and bombs roam around to rob with her freedom. It felt so real for being a hero until the minutes went to zero. I am once adrift to my fantasy, escaping pain and loneliness in reality. Then you came to my world unexpectedly. There I knew that I want you to be with me. You are the princess and I am Super Mario. I will show my love wherever you go. But the reality never favors me, as I realized that no one knew me. This is not where I belong, that love easily comes along. I went silent in a flickering room, trying to escape this unbearable doom. Now the screen starts to fade its light, and it seems to be a long night. What a beautiful story and a painful ending in both literary pieces with a different interpretation. This shows the same flow of the event, but in another flavor of verses. And this is an example of a literary adaptation, from a story adapted to a poem. How do you find this lesson so far? In the study, there are unclear ideas. You can go back from the beginning of our video. But if you still have some questions regarding this lesson, please ask your subject teacher to address your concern. If everything is good now, we can now proceed answering the activities. Let's go! This time, let us see if you understood our lesson. In your LAS, there are activities that you will answer about the literary adaptation. For the first activity, you will read the poem Cronulla Beach, written by Jose Wendell B. Cabrera, as it portrays the incident occurred in Australia because of race discrimination. The writer made an adaptation of this event into a poem to show the differences of the Asian and Australian culture that resulted in racial discrimination. Also read the article below about the news of this event and compare the details of the museum adaptation from the article and the poem. Identify all the details that are the same from the literary source to the poem. Write your answers on the space provided below the given poem on your LAS. Let us read this article. Cronulla Beach by Jose Wendell B. Capili. Blood surges rapidly along Cronulla Beach. Armed with bats, white bodies are met, replications of tent, parasols and sunblinds, spreading all over what used to be Cronulla. Aboriginal landscape, the place of pink seashells. There is no chieftain on the shore, no starfish, where the minion shatters not too far behind. Thugs and their hand made constrict exquisite, shades of perplexity to keep generations pure and sterile. Spaces beneath vestiges of hamlets from long ago have become driftwood, shells, cleavers of melting pots in succession. They are swaying eerily, translucent as postcards, bereft of scintillating light in the heated up weather, so racializing the zone. December 11, 2005, race riots in Sydney, Australia, or Cronulla riots. On December 11, 2005, racial tensions exploded into violence in the Sydney suburb of Cronulla, New South Wales, Australia, with rioting by white Australians against anyone they perceived to be of Lebanese descent. The riots lasted a few days and spread to surrounding suburbs. In 2005, tensions between British, Australians, and immigrants were led by a confrontation between teenage and young adult Middle Eastern immigrants and young Anglo-Australians around the beaches. The mostly white Cronulla area youth resented incursions by the Middle Eastern youths from other suburbs, people the white youths called Westies. Minor confrontations and fights not unusual during the Australian summer in beach areas between youth groups built up into the incident known as the Cronulla riots. The riot has continued over the next couple days with threats, vandalism, and violence. Many were injured, including the police officers and immigrants, as they were beaten with baseball bat and thrown with rocks. Altogether, 51 people were arrested in Cronulla at the original riots, and another 53 were arrested in surrounding suburbs over the next few days. Those 104 arrestees faced 285 criminal charges. Let us now identify all the details that are the same from the literary source to the poem. Don't forget to write your answer on the space provided below the given poem on your LAS. The first detail, the same in both texts as the Cronulla Beach, where the event happened. Another are the poem armed with bats to cause riot along the beach. Aside from that, we can see the white bodies that refer to the Westerners. Due to the non-stop portrayal of hatred towards the Asian people, there were blood surges rapidly. There are also replications of tents which served as their lodging. Parasols and sunlights are also stated in both texts. Lastly, the thugs and their hands that caused many casualties. Those are the same details in both texts. Let us read the instruction for the second activity. Based on your answer in Activity A, make an adaptation of the Cronulla Beach incident by drawing the details of the event or the scene. Draw your output in the given box and briefly describe your output. Your work will be graded based on the set criteria and equivalent to 15 points. Let me read the criteria for you. Description of the drawing will be 6 points, and content of the drawing will be 3 points, and another 3 points for the creativity of the drawing, and another 3 points for the neatness of your drawing. All in all, there are 15 points. After finishing your output, you will briefly describe to show its relevance to the first activity. Let us bring out our creativity and skill in fulfilling this activity. And for the activity C, you are going to make your own version or adaptation of the fairy tale Cinderella. You can watch the movie on YouTube to get the essential elements, or you may read the given summary on your LAS already analyzed in its elements. You will just need a sentence or two to fill in the elements based on your own version. Of course, you will state the type of the literary adaptation you did use in making your version and provide some evidences. Now, let us see how well you reflected on the lesson you have studied. How can you apply your learnings from this lesson in real life? How can you apply it as a son or daughter in your family? What about as a student in school? Feel free to answer this portion to monitor your own learning in every lesson. Congratulations for successfully finishing our lesson for this week. In this module, you were able to produce your own creative adaptation. Moreover, we also learned that many adaptations have been made from different literature and culture of the world to show their enriching influence and importance to our ever-changing civilization. Also, in adapting a literary piece to another genre or medium, we should consider the essential elements of the original story to determine if it needs changes from the story or retention of the details to preserve the underlying message or theme. The 4 types of literary adaptation will be your guide in interpreting the source materials. Once again, congratulations for finishing this video lesson, and may you continue doing well in the succeeding lesson. Thank you and have a wonderful day.